Sports medicine, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition, in this case, a special edition of Sports Medicine. And I'm your host, Carlos de Los Angeles, certified personal trainer, NASM, CES, BES on the works, and certified nutrition coach, and of course, DotFit certified practitioner. But today, it's not about me. It's about our first ever special guest on the show. Oh my. She is none other than U.S. Army neuroscientist and sleep research expert, 1.Allison Brager. Welcome.
It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's an honor, and you're one of the best NASM contributors also, and we appreciate your time here today.
Oh, absolutely. Anything for my, anything for the family.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so before we get into the script, let's get the elephant out of the room. Let's address the elephant. Tell me and tell everybody about your NASA training. And I'm rooting for you since right now to be the first woman to ever walk the moon. Tell me about that.
Well, that would be wonderful, right? Like, I grew up in Ohio, idolizing all the astronauts because Ohio has the most astronauts and presidents. One of the first reports I ever did in second grade was on Neil Armstrong, and I dressed up like him. So I've always been enamored by space, right? But yeah, so I'm in the pipeline for the astronaut program, and obviously they train using underwater maneuvers and scuba. So I've been in the Florida Keys the past 2 weeks getting my butt kicked by a bunch of Army and Navy doctors, teaching me how to, handle myself at depths of up to 100 feet when you're just not mentally with it, and physically it's very demanding. I'm still kind of recovering from it, which I noticed doing my CrossFit workouts now. They're definitely much harder than they should be. But yeah, it was 2 weeks of learning to, how to push myself more mentally, physically, doing some medical evacuation procedures, like all those things that you would expect to do up there in space if I ever have the chance to go, and to be prepared to do, right? Because it's not just about stepping on the moon or stepping on Mars. There's that whole journey there and the whole journey back, and then the interim time in between. So you have to be mentally and physically ready for that.
Wow, unbelievable. Yeah, definitely. And if there's someone who can do it, it's definitely you. And you're training with CrossFit, that helps a lot. I mean, my father's a psychiatrist, and he was telling me, oh, she's doing that training. That's brutal. That nitrogen thing and going underwater and that. And I told him, man, Dad, she is a beast. She's a CrossFit elite athlete. If somebody can do it, if there's a woman on earth that can do it, it's you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's start talking about your bread and butter, the sleep research. Oh, yes. And here we go. First thing, what are the circadian rhythms and the chronotypes?
All right. So, I've spent about 15 years investigating circadian rhythms and chronotypes, and it's actually, I will retire happy from the Army if I could use chronotypes to put soldiers in certain missions.
Okay.
So I'll start with, let's start with circadian rhythms. So if you break down the word circadian, circa means around in Latin, and dia means day in Latin. And around a day, that's what a circadian rhythm is. It's a naturally oscillating rhythm that changes across 24 hours, and it describes basic bodily processes. So endocrine factors that are released, like melatonin. Melatonin's only released at night. Even your heart rate changes across a 24-hour period. Your blood pressure, your ability to do weightlifting. Believe it or not, people are better weightlifters in the evening than they are during the morning.
Wow. I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah.
Even morning people? Sorry to interrupt. Even morning people?
Yeah, so it has to do with a circadian rhythm of epinephrine release. And epinephrine release sort of rises across the day, just like with cortisol release. And so when your epinephrine peak is close to its highest, that's when your weightlifting numbers are the best across the day.
Wow, unbelievable, unbelievable. And the chronotypes, I believe that's when the so-called evening people, morning people are kind of like talked about. So that's basically the chronotypes, right? Like everybody has like kind of like their own predetermined kind of circadian rhythm.
Yeah. So these rhythms I talk about, they hold true for everyone, but some people's happen earlier than others. So myself, I am a tried and true night owl. So my rhythms are later than most normal people in the Army whose rhythms are earlier. And so all it is it's a simple clinical questionnaire where it asks you, what time of the day do you perform at your best? And so a really early morning person would say, well, I have the best workouts, or I am mentally the best in the early morning hours. Whereas somebody like me would say, I am the most creative and I do the best work late at night, or like in the middle of the day. So that's what chronotype is. But you could also see, like for the military, how chronotype can be used to our advantage, right? Because in the military, you do 24-hour operations. And yeah, sometimes you have to work for 24 hours, but most people can't do that day in, day out. So you want people who have late evening chronotypes to do shift work that's late at night. And you want people with early morning chronotypes to do shift work that starts very early in the day.
Sure. Wow. Impressive. Okay, now moving on to that protein that you helped discover. Let's hear about that. The BMAL1, that's actually, I believe, present in muscle tissue that induces sleep. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I can't take full credit for this because this is a 10-year project and I got in like halfway through, but I did discover the mechanism of this protein and how it regulates sleep. So to bring it back to the beginning, for years, everyone has always thought that sleep is by the brain, for the brain, and of the brain. So that is what controls sleep. But we found that that is actually only part of the story, because the brain interacts with all organs of the body and all tissues, right, in order to help the body and these tissues recover. So there happens to be this protein factor that is called brain and muscle aren't like factor. And the reason it's called that is because it's highly expressed in the brain, but it's also highly expressed in the skeletal muscle. And so what we found, so all these studies were actually done in mice. So we took we mutated and manipulated the genetic environment of mice. And we found that when we manipulated the expression of this protein just in the skeletal muscle and nowhere else in the body using a very sophisticated technique, that these mice were like super soldiers. They had this incredible ability to recover from sleep deprivation. They also were like super athletes in that you could put them on a treadmill and they would run for hours, and they were eliciting like fat burning pathways. They were just tremendous athletes, if you will. But it got us thinking about sleep being regulated outside the brain and by the skeletal muscle. And it would make sense when it comes to exercise, right? Is like the more you exercise, and especially the more you train, and especially when you compete, the more fatigued you are. And that's also going to open up this gateway to have more deep restorative sleep. So I do believe that, from discovering this protein, this is sort of the stepping stone for many future studies to look at how these interactions between the skeletal muscle and the brain are. One of the interactions I found is with acetylcholine. That would make sense, right?
Yeah.
Choline is what is responsible for muscle firing and muscle connectivity with the brain. So we basically found in these mice that were super athletes or super soldiers, if you will, that they had heightened acetylcholinergic release which would help explain a lot of the reasons why they could, have such high sustaining levels of endurance, but then also recover from sleep deprivation or handle sleep deprivation so effectively.
Wonderful, wonderful. And that, to that point, that's when, especially people who start exercising, our clients, for example, in health and fitness, they just tell you, one of the earliest adaptations they get is that, since I started training like a month ago, I'm sleeping so well now. Yeah. And such a deep sleep and feel so good in the morning. And that explains a lot, definitely.
Yep, exactly.
Unbelievable. Wow. Awesome. Now, there's another good thing about this conversation, and it's light. Oh, man. Blue light, red light, and light in general. Yep. What can you tell us about that and its relationship to sleep? When we're going to sleep, do we need a certain color of light in a room or no lights at all? Tell me about that.
Lighting absolutely matters. So I have a friend, she actually created a whole company around developing like light recipes for professional sports teams and military personnel. So basically these light recipes, in Fortune 500 companies too, it's been a recent thing in corporate America. Large exposures to natural sunlight as well as blue enriched light are great for promoting alertness and alertness signaling pathways in the brain. And a lot of it has to do with a lot of the neurochemical cascades I just talked about.
Okay.
So it's great during the day, right? If you want to amplify your productivity, you increase your exposure to these blue enriched light. Okay. However, that can be your nemesis at night, right? Because this thing right here emits tons of...
It's so hard to stay away from that, like when we're going to sleep.
Our TVs do. And so that's a deterrent for sleep, right? Because it actively blocks the release of melatonin, which is naturally released at night and helps you fall asleep. So, it's a trade-off. Now, when it comes to red light, believe it or not, red light, like if you break it down to physics, red light is very low energy. And humans and mammals in general, we're not responsive to red light. So you could stare at a red light bulb all day and all night, and it will have little to minimal impact on your sleep.
But I do think I read, like, there's certain populations that improve their sleep with red light. Am I wrong, or
I mean,
something that's not hasn't improved?
I have heard that before, but my theory is one of the ways that we can falsely or sort of coax people to falling asleep in the lab at a time of day when they normally wouldn't sleep is by dimming the lights. So there's this thing called DIL mode, which is dim light melatonin onset. And so that's, to me, that would be my theory behind that, is because with red light, it's going to make the room dim. And so that's going to trigger the release of melatonin.
Melatonin. Okay. Perfect. Awesome. All right. So there's another thing, that I read on Meathead, your book. I highly recommend to everybody. And if you're an athlete out there, really, you have to read Meathead like for yesterday. It's unbelievable for athletes and people who love exercise in general. In my opinion, you explained all those physiological processes masterfully in a way that everybody can understand. You did a great job there. And one of the things that I loved was, and I didn't know before, is tart cherry juice. What about this? And it's content of melatonin and taking it before going to bed. Really interesting topic. Let me hear it.
So melatonin, in my opinion, it should be used on a use case basis. The reason is because melatonin is one of the most effective ways to shift circadian rhythms. So if you happen to take melatonin at a time where your body's not releasing it, it could advance or delay your sleep cycle. Where I think melatonin has the best use is with travelers, right? Like when you're traveling across different time zones.
Okay, awesome.
You